Thanks for joining us today. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Lee Ji-yoon in Seoul. Coming up on today's edition of Business Daily. Korea's exports rose over 13% in May from a year earlier on the back of a boost in overseas sales of chips and displays. After the G7 summit last week, German Chancellor Angela Merkel questions America's reliability as a world power, and U.S. President Donald Trump fires back. Are the two economic powerhouses going their separate ways? But first, President Moon Jae-in is stepping up efforts to make good on his election pledge number 1, job creation. The issue took center stage during his regular meeting with his senior secretaries and aides on this Thursday. And in order to deliver the promise, the president needs parliamentary approval of a 10 trillion won, or roughly $8.9 billion budget supplement.
먼저 국민들에 충분히 알려드리고 그리고 또 그 힘으로 또 국회를 또 설득하는데 필요하다면 저도 일자리 추경안이 국회에 제출되고 난 이후에 적절한 시기에 직접 국회에 가서 시정연설의 형태로 일자리 추경의 필요성을 우리 의원들께 설명할 수도.
It's not common for the president to make a trip to Parliament seeking approval for an extra budget bill, but Mr. Moon's remarks reflect the many challenges that lie ahead in getting his agenda approved by the opposition-led National Assembly. Now, President Moon has said again and again that his first priority will be creating jobs. And this morning, his Special Committee on Job Creation unveiled its 100-day plan. Speaking to reporters at the government complex in central Seoul, the committee's vice chair Lee Yong-sup said the administration is reviewing plans to impose financial penalties on conglomerates that hire too many irregular workers instead of more regular employees. The committee, however, reassured big companies that the penalties will be within a reasonable level and that they may receive tax credits if they change the status of their workers. The committee also plans to gradually convert irregular jobs into regular positions in the public sector. Exports are still considered crucial when it comes to job creation here in Korea, with 1 out of 4 positions stemming from outbound shipments. A report from the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy indicates that exports have led to the direct or indirect employment of roughly 6.1 million people in 2014. The figure has been steadily rising since the year 2000. On the other hand, the proportion of jobs produced from domestic spending or investment has either decreased or stayed the same over the same time period. For more than 5 years straight, Korea's trade balance has been in the black. Last month, exports got another boost from sales of semiconductors, which grew for the 7th month in a row. Our Oh Soo-young reports.
South Korea's exports grew by double digits in May for the 5th straight month, driven by record-breaking chip sales. Outbound shipments in May amounted to some $45 billion, up 13.4% compared to the same month last year.
9 out of 13 key export items saw growth, 6 of them by double digits, which underpinned the trend of steady recovery. Although export figures did fall compared to April, this is because there were fewer working days in May.
Among the 9 key export products that saw gains last month, semiconductors and solid-state drives recorded a historic high of $8.4 billion, thanks to a huge boost in global appetite for Korean memory chips. OLED panel exports also soared to $720 million, the second highest amount to date. The total volume of exports grew by 6.4%. Korea's shipments to China continued to pick up for the 7th straight month by 7.5%. In fact, exports to all major trading partners increased, except to the US and Middle Eastern countries. Meanwhile, imports rose 18% to $39 billion, but the country's trade balance remained in the black for the 64th consecutive month, at $6 billion. With semiconductor sales expected to grow, along with a generally positive outlook of global trade this year, experts say Korea is likely to see its export figures continue to pick up for the time being, an upward trend that's continued since November 2016. All this, plus more investment in facilities and construction, has helped boost GDP. According to OECD data on Thursday, Korea's economic growth rate in the first quarter came to 0.9%, up half a percentage point from the previous quarter. That puts Korea well above the OECD average of 0.4%. Oh Soo-young, Business Daily.
It looks like inflation is going to remain stable for the time being, hovering around the government's target of 2%. This, according to data on consumer prices released earlier today. Our Kim Jae-yeon has the details.
Consumer prices rose in May, touching the government's target level of 2%, an important indicator that the local economy is on the recovery track. Statistics Korea says the consumer prices index ticked up, gaining 2% last month from a year earlier. It also climbed 0.1% in May from the previous month on the back of rising gas, fish, and livestock prices. The prices of clothing, lodging, and utilities also rose in May from the previous month, while that of transportation and entertainment fell. Statistics Korea says the government's decision to increase the price of gas by nearly 2% in May canceled out its efforts to reduce electric bills. Vegetable prices fell in May on increased supply, but the price of eggs went up due to the recent bird flu outbreak. Statistics Korea said it's not overly concerned about spiking petroleum prices. They surged by nearly 9% in May from the same period last year, a slower year-on-year rise than seen in May 2016. Korea's benchmark Dubai crude sold at an average price of some $51 a barrel in May, down $1.50 from the previous month. The agency does, however, point to efforts to mitigate the adverse effects from rising temperatures, drought, and the recent bird flu outbreak, as they would be key factors that affect consumer prices in the months to come. Kim Ji-yeon, Business Daily.
Korea's central bank governor Lee Ju-yeol has emphasized structural reforms are essential to long-term growth for the country, and especially for extended growth momentum in the economy. At the opening of the 2017 Bank of Korea International Conference, Lee called attention to structural reforms and how macroeconomic policies must support these efforts to overcome income inequality, an aging population, and financial imbalances. The BOK governor also noted that inclusive growth is becoming more important and that although the global economy is showing signs of breaking out of chronically low growth and low inflation, it's yet unclear whether this upward trend will continue. Korea's global competitiveness ranking was unchanged this year compared to a year earlier, mainly due to the country's sluggish economy and political vacuum seen last year. According to a report by the International Institute for Management Development, Korea ranked 29th in global competitiveness among 63 countries surveyed, identical to its 2016 ranking. In terms of economic performance, the country came in at 22nd, down one notch from a year earlier, as the country's exports plunged 6% on-year amid a slump in global demand. The institute recommended Seoul carry out structural reforms in the corporate and labor sectors and better insulate itself from external risks. Two world superpowers are clashing over trade. At the G7 summit last week, U.S. President Donald Trump aired his complaints about trade relations with Germany, while German Chancellor Angela Merkel said after the summit that Europe can no longer depend on others. So what's behind this growing tension between the two countries? Let's find out.
After meeting U.S. President Donald Trump in Washington back in March, German Chancellor Angela Merkel has had little success in finding common ground with a new American counterpart when it comes to fair and free trade. And their relationship seems to have taken a turn for the worse last week during the G7 summit. During the meeting, Trump and his 6 fellow G7 leaders agreed to do more to fight terrorism, but remained far apart on issues like climate change and free trade, with the U.S. leader now signaling he may pull out of the global Paris Agreement. After the summit, Merkel gave her strongest indication yet that Europe and the U.S. under President Trump are drifting apart.
The times when we could fully rely on others are to some extent over. I experienced that in the last few days.
Trump fired back on Tuesday by tweeting the U.S. has a massive trade deficit with Germany and that this is quote-unquote very bad for the U.S. and that things will change. So, as the two countries continue to drift apart, how will this affect trade relations in other parts of the world and Korea?
And to tell us more about this, Professor Shin Sang-hyuk of Kyunghee University joins us in the studio today. So good to see you.
Yes, thank you.
All right. So I think we're seeing the start of Trump's protectionist sentiment affecting global trade relations. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, yes, considering the weight of the U.S. economy and the global economy, well, definitely it is very, very important for the many countries around the world in their trade. Well, as you know, the USA produced about 20% out of total global GDP, which means that many countries have the trade, a very close trade with the United States. So if USA takes the very protectionistic trade policy, definitely it can be a direct effect on the economies of the many countries around the world. Secondly, the USA has huge trade deficit with China and Germany. Well, in case in the relationship with the China, they had, as of the end of 2016, they had about $350 billion trade deficit. Wow. So, which means that the USA will take some actions or measures against China. Well, China is G20, right? G2 member country, which means that also with China, many countries have very huge amount of trade relations. That means that if, because of the new economic policies taken by the Mr. Trump, the Chinese economy get hurt, that means it can indirectly affect very negatively on the economies of many countries. So we can say that the new economic policy taken by Mr. Trump will affect directly or indirectly on the economies around the world.
Then, if the U.S. and Europe end up going their separate ways, then what impact will this have on the global economy?
Well, as you know very well, over the last several decades, U.S. and European Union have supported for free trade principle. But after the inauguration of the Trump administration, as we know already very well, they started to take some protectionistic trade policy. And also they put more priorities on bilateral approaches in the trade relationship with the other countries, not based on multilateralism, which can be characterized by WTO system. And definitely, so we can say that European Union will keep the free trade principle while the USA will take some more protectionist trade principle. That means that such a kind of different approaches taken by the US and European Union will affect the global trade order. That means that I doubt whether WTO can control or keep the basic principle of free trade in the global trade. That means indirectly some countries will try to break off one of the basic principles in international trade, I mean free trade principle. So definitely there are high possibility of emerging protectionism in the global trade.
Now, what about the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, or TTIP, between the U.S. and European Union, which has been on hold since last year? Where do you see this going?
Well, in fact, very recently, a few days ago, the Secretary of Commerce, U.S. Secretary of Commerce, he said that the U.S. is open to resuming the talk for TTIP because after Mr. Trump became the president of the United States, he decided to withdraw from the TPP negotiation.
Right.
And because of this one, many economists worry about the U.S. trade policy, particularly about the multilateral-based approaches to discuss about global trade issues. But after the decision was made by the United States, we can see some changes in the trade relations among nations. The European Union had been more aggressively, have more FTAs with the many countries around the world, which means that the EU is emerging as one of the hubs of international trade, while the USA was facing a kind of some isolation from the global trading system. So maybe on the part of USA, they should reconsider the direction of their trade policy, which means they are ready to, have negotiation for the FTAs or other trade, trade deal. So in this context, we can understand the new decision made by the United States. New decision means that to resume the TTIP talk with the European Union. In fact, Germany has been very sensitive because of the possibility of the halt of the TTIP negotiation. But because of this, new decision, resuming the TTIP talk with the European Union, maybe to some degree, USA will avoid such a kind of the burden from the international community as the kind of some protectionistic supporting country in international trade.
So we have been seeing the European Union kind of trying to stitch up more FTAs with other countries, including India this week. Right. And also with U.S. seemingly drifting apart from a lot of other nations in regards to free trade, China looks like it's hoping to take its place and step up trade with European countries. So tell us more about this and how this may affect the United States as well.
After G20 meeting, U.S., European Union, leaders met the Chinese counterpart, and both parties have reconfirmed the direction of their cooperation, particularly in international trade and climate agreement. I want to focus about the trade relations between the U.S. and the European Union and China. But as I mentioned already, China is one of the major trade players in the world, and EU has been one of the main players in the world. So, because the USA's new economic policy, particularly trade policy, which has features of protectionistic policies in it, definitely to keep the momentum in their economy or in their trade, definitely they should have to find an alternative which can be replaced with a real trade with the United States. Definitely so for the European Union, China became very important trade partner. At the same time, for China, EU certainly became one of the most important trade partners. So they have enough reason to cooperate with each other right now and in the future.
Right. So amid growing U.S. protectionism and also, changing trade relations worldwide, what should Korea do? What should the new Korean government do in order to protect itself and boost its own economy?
Yes, that's a very important question. Actually, Moon Jae-in government just started. And we are in the middle of the new challenges, so to speak. At the time, many experts empathize we have to take some appropriate measures to maximize our national interests in such a kind of very competitive circumstances. One of the recommendable ways for us is maybe we have to strengthen the existing relations with the USA government and the European Union's the political leaders. At the same time, we have to strengthen the relations between the private sectors. Korean companies have the close business relations with American counterparts and the European counterparts. Definitely, we encourage the private sector to play some role in persuading our position to the American and European counterparts. If I had one more thing, then actually we have very good contact points in the United States among the political leaders. For example, the current Secretary of Commerce, Mr. Wolbers, he was actually the head of the USA government when we had the financial crisis in 1997, the financial crisis. So we can. He has very abundant information about Korean economy, so maybe we can use this relationship very efficiently. And another one is that there is another person who is the Robert Portman. Actually, he is the senator, Republican senator, and actually when Korea started the FTA negotiation with the U.S., at the time he was the head of USTR. USTR is stands for U.S. Trade Representative. Actually the government, the muscle in charge of trade negotiation and trade the affairs in the United States. So definitely we should have to use those kind of the relations very efficiently. Then I think that certainly that it will be one of the best ways for us to defend our position.
And be ready for whatever is going to come to us, right?
For example, I mean, according to the ITC, which is one of the U.S. research think tank about trade issues, they released that USA had about $28 billion trade deficit in the trade with Korea. They said that they empathize the trade deficit, but without Korea-US FTA, the trade deficit could reach about $440 billion. Definitely, because of the Korea-US FTA, we could reduce the trade deficit. Definitely, USA could reduce the trade deficit in the trade with Korea. We have to use those kind of logic in the contact with the American counterparts.
All right. Thank you so much for your insight today.
My pleasure.
Today, June 1st, marks the 10th anniversary of the free trade agreement between Korea and ASEAN, as the two sides have become key trade partners over the past decade. For more on the changes we've seen so far and what to expect going forward, here's our Oh Jung-hee.
Ambassadors of Southeast Asian nations to Korea and regional economic cooperative bodies, as well as high-level officials from Korea's trade ministry and related organizations, gathered on Thursday. This to celebrate 10 years since a free trade agreement between Korea and the Association of Southeast Asian Countries, or ASEAN, went into effect.
The FTA that went into effect on June 1st of 2007 became an important opportunity for Korea and ASEAN to enhance economic cooperation. The two sides will continue to see growth, not only in trade and investment, but also in various fields, including the cultural sector.
ASEAN is now Korea's second largest trade partner, with Vietnam, Singapore, and Malaysia being the top three among its member countries. According to Korea's trade ministry, trade between the two sides grew by almost 6% annually on average. Trade with ASEAN now accounts for over 13% of Korea's total trade, seeing significant growth after starting from below 10% in 2007. The FTA is seen as being a win-win for both sides. Over the past 10 years, Korea was able to expand its array of export goods to ASEAN to include wireless communication devices and panel displays, breaking out of its central export item, semiconductors. For ASEAN, Korea's increased investment has led to overall growth in ASEAN's exports to the world and helped transform its industry structure from being labor-intensive to capital-intensive.
ASEAN has great potential. For Korea, it's the second largest investment market and production base following China. And Korea has experience and know-how on rapid economic growth. If Korea's technology and ASEAN's cheap labor and rich resources come together, it will further improve bilateral trade.
Korea's trade ministry looks to have its FTA with ASEAN upgraded in order to expand market openness and tariff cuts, in addition to increasing investment and ODA programs. This would help elevate the country's relationship with the regional bloc, not only on the economic front, but also in terms of diplomatic ties.
It has showed average annual growth rate was 5.5%. And it has been always 2 or 3% higher if you compare to any other regional economic bloc. The Korean company should utilize on this momentum.
On the occasion of the 10th anniversary, Korea and ASEAN hope to take their economic cooperation to the next level and strengthen their strategic partnership. They also agreed to further expand people-to-people exchanges and cultural interactions. Oh Jung-hee, Business Daily.
And that wraps it up for today. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with more at the same time, same place for your Business Daily. Until then, goodbye.